Okay, we're recording. So welcome to Ocular Insight, and thank you for joining us here. I have Jeff Howard, and he is our first courageous, awesome male interviewee. I don't know how to politically correctly talk about everything, but I'm gonna do my best. He's the first guy that I've been able to connect with who's had the availability to get in here on an interview. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just kind of briefly to introduce Jeff here. He was he was diagnosed in February of 2018, and he has kind of a pretty crazy journey with his diagnosis alone. So I am going to just go ahead and ask him to kind of tell us the story behind his diagnosis, because his diagnosis took a few months, which I think, as I'm hearing from some people, that seems to be the norm for some people, and it seems to be totally different for other people. So I know I got diagnosed within 2 days, and other people it takes 3-4 months. I think I've even heard of somebody it took 6 or 7 months. So okay, Jeff, tell us about your diagnosis and kind of what led to this.
So back in 2017, well, I should go back way back. So about 20 years ago, I got diagnosed with ocular melanocytosis. And what that is an overproduction of melanin in the eyeball. And the doctor that I was seeing at the time basically said to me, hey, listen, this is something that I studied in college, and, I wrote a paper on it. And just know that eventually you're going to probably get cancer and lose your eye. And at the time, it was probably true, because that was more along the lines of what, was the treatment back then. But so about 2 years prior to the diagnosis, I noticed that I had these wavy lines down in my eyeball on my left-hand side. And, I didn't really give it much thought. I thought, well, that's all right. My dad's had problems with his eyes. My mom's got problems. Everyone's got problems. And as it started to get a little bit worse, I noticed so I started doing a lot of traveling in 2017. I got laid off of a job, had to do some, consulting. And while I was in West Virginia, I started noticing, because I work in radiology, and I noticed that when I was in dark areas, I was running into people. I was kind of bumping into walls, running into things. And I thought, well, it's kind of weird, it's maybe my balance is off or something. And so people started telling me, they're like, it's really weird, you seem like you're kind of disoriented. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, you can't see, you're gonna be a little disoriented. But once I started working even more as time went on, I noticed that I was getting these flashes, these fireworks, and all these kind of weird things happening. And I'd be sitting in the middle of a meeting, and I just all of a sudden just kind of jump, and someone says, well, gosh, what's going on? And so I ended up calling the doctor, my ophthalmologist at the time, and I had just seen an optometrist probably about a month prior. And she was telling me, oh, everything looks great, kind of a normal exam. And when it came time to go in to the ophthalmologist, they said, well, you've already seen this person, and they're a specialist. They know what they're doing. So that led them to believe that maybe I had some neurology problems. So I ended up going to see a neurologist, which hadn't been the first time. I had an accident a couple years prior. Ended up, it was actually a pretty bad car wreck from behind. So bad, actually, that the lady's car caught on fire. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. But anyway, so I went to this neurologist, and he said, well, I can't figure out what's wrong with you. You look fine. Everything looks great. So he set me up for an MRI, set me up for an EEG, set me up for all kinds of neurology exams. And it didn't. And what's kind of ironic about all this is, I later found out that as I was looking at the MRI, because I always get copies of things, that's just kind of what I do, medical imaging. So I'm always curious. And, I actually ended up seeing it in the MRI. When you know what to look for, it's kind of easy to find. But anyway, so the last part of the whole neurology thing was a retinal exam, because he thought, well, maybe it's something with your retina, because we can't rule that out. Even though your doctor already said it was fine, we'll take a look at it. So I went out consulting and scheduled an appointment about 2 weeks prior. I'm coming back on the airplane. And do you mind if I share this story? with this. Okay, so coming back on the airline, it was kind of, I just gotten off a horrible week of just, all I wanted to do was sleep on the airplane. I was going to put my headphones in and just relax. And there was this lady next to me who just started talking. You get on an airplane, people start talking to you like, oh, here we go. Like, right. So I've got a 4-hour, plane ride, and so now what am I going to do? Anyway, so we get to talking, and probably about 30 minutes or so into the conversation, she turns her light on overhead, and she looked at me square in the eye and said, "Do you have cancer?" And I'm like, "What? Why would you say something like that?" And she says, "Well, I see a freckle in your eye." Yeah, it's like, why? So she said, well, that's how mine started. And she started telling me about how she had this disease, uveal melanoma, and all the different treatments that are out there, and sharing me how she lost her eye, and she'd had multiple metastases within the 20 years since that she'd had her diagnosis. And I didn't really think about it much at the time, the length of time. But now knowing what I know, that was more of an encouragement later on. But basically, we got off the plane, and she gave me her business card, and she said, if you need to talk to anybody when you get your diagnosis, call me. I'm like, what do you mean when I get my diagnosis? This is crazy. So
I totally would have been like that too. I would have been like, who are you to tell me I have eye cancer? You're not a doctor.
Right. Well, but she was the nicest lady. She was so full of energy, and we were both musicians. Her husband was a musician. He worked for Microsoft. I'm a computer nerd. So I mean, we kind of hit it off pretty well and had other good conversations. But so anyway, I go and get ready to go to my rental appointment. A couple of weeks later, and the night before, I'm like, I got this business card in my hand. I don't even know what to do with this. So, we're minimalists in our household. So anything that we don't need, we just kind of throw it away. And so I threw the business card away, thinking, I won't need it. So I go on the next day. Of course, the doctor's looking at me, he goes, usually they're like, yeah, everything's fine, it's just a normal exam. But it was just, And then he walked out of the room, gets me dilated, does all these, CTs and all this kind of stuff. And then he brings me back into the room, and he says, well, let's go get an ultrasound, get the ultrasound. And after it was done, it was just crazy. He just looks at me and he says, you have cancer, you're going to die. I'm like, well, and thank you. How much do I owe you? Right. And so he says, well, how do you feel about that? I said, I don't know. I kind of knew this was coming 20 years ago. So it's really not much of a shock. I guess today's the day. And he kept saying, he says, well, you're just so positive. Why are you so positive? You should be fearful of this. And I'm like, yeah. So, it's just, so I've been a Christian for a long time, and I've got joy, it's just the way I am. So, but that was kind of hard to explain to him. And he's just like, okay, we're going to set you up with a doctor. You're going to San Francisco and you're going to get checked out. So I did. And the doctor, of course, there said the same thing. He's like, we confirmed it. You've got cancer. My wife was with me, and both of us just kind of lost it, right? Not tears or anything, but just like kind of a shock.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's like such big news, and it sounds kind of like, before, like what we were talking about with like my diagnosis, it sounds like you kind of internalized it a little bit because you had to in that moment. But it almost, I guess to me, it almost sounds like you were being strong doctor because he couldn't handle it. Like it kind of sounded like your doctor couldn't handle the news, and you were like, it was coming. Somebody told me it was coming. Like, so I just have to trust that it's going to be okay. But like, then, like you said, the kind of the shock wears off, and then you have that, like, there's actually some research behind it, but just the stress cycle completes, and you feel that like shaking and shuddering feeling that can happen, like in animals when they're traumatized or hit by, a car or whatever. So that's interesting, like that you kind of notice that, and that's a notable part of like what you remember.
Well, totally. Well, once I was done with the rental doctor, so I was actually driving a rental car around, and went to go to the airport. My wife was coming to pick me up, And when she came to pick me up, as she was, I was waiting for her, all of a sudden it kind of sunk in like, oh my gosh, somebody just told me I have cancer. What does this mean? What does this look like? And so I was kind of shaking, and my wife shows up and she's like, okay, well, get in the car, I'll take you home. And I'm like, no, I think you need to get in the passenger seat. I got some things to tell you. And so I didn't obviously want to just get shocked and, get, nervous driving. But anyway, so when we were in San Francisco, the doctor said, you've got several different options. He says, however, since your tumor is so close to the optic nerve, you got to be kind of careful with what you select. So we chose proton beam treatment because he said it was more like 98% effective. And I said, well, great, give me those odds because, I don't want anything less than that. So the following week we come back in and we get, they remove the eye, cut the muscles and put tantalum ring markers in the back of the eye so that they'd have a target to shoot for the proton beam. And I thought for sure, okay, well, this is great. We're going to get this done. Let's go for it. And so we submitted it to insurance and we waited and we waited and we waited. So that was back in March when we had the surgery. Or when I had the surgery, I guess there wasn't no we in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question. You said that you had the proton beam treatment, and you mentioned that the proton beam treatment, did they actually remove the whole eye, or did they just kind of snip some of the muscles and move around it?
Snip the muscles and moved around it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would imagine. I'm a little fuzzy on those details.
No, it's okay. I just was like, not sure exactly what had happened there. So that's interesting. I had the plaque done because my tumor was in the front corner, I guess, of my eye, and so it kind of had a different placement. And the plaque was a little bit easier to place there.
Gotcha.
So, okay, so you had the proton beam, you submitted it to insurance, and you were waiting to just to hear back if they were going to approve it and they were going to cover it.
Exactly. And they actually wrote back and said it was not medically necessary. I'm like,
I hear this and I'm like, wait, hold on. What?
Right. Yeah, that's
who
what I said
is
too.
from insurance that we can find and share this video? You need to cover this.
Right. So, but this is actually a good thing. So I fought back against it. I thought, well, okay, no, that's not true. And so I started writing, and kept getting the same responses back several times that this is no longer this is not medically necessary. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is the end. And then I thought, well, gosh, maybe I need to go back and talk to my doctor, right? And so he wrote them a letter and said, okay, we're doing this. So one part of the story that I got to tell you is after the diagnosis, I'm kind of backtracking here. So I actually went, that's how I kind of work with memories sometimes. So when we got back home from the diagnosis, the first thing that was on my mind, I mentioned that business card earlier. The first thing that was on my mind was, man, I got to find that business card now because I got to call this gal and talk to her. And she actually became a big part of this whole testimony, right? So I went to look for the card. I emptied out all the garbage cans. I mean, I was up to my elbows in garbage for like an hour. I thought, oh man, I can't find this thing. So as I was walking back into the household, it was almost like in my head, it was almost like, the Lord was saying to me, is this really how hard you're going to fight? I mean, are you giving up now? I'm like, no. So I walked back out and right on top of the garbage, I swear it was this business card. And I'm like, all right. I thought it was kind of strange, but anyway, I walked back in, I started contacting her and I'm like, this is great. So we started talking. She introduced me to a current site, to Melody, to other folks, and started talking through it. And I started getting engaged with the current site, which was great because I didn't realize that there was a group out there that existed to talk about this. And I thought, oh gosh, so there's more people than just me who have this. And when I found out how rare it was, not only did I think that was just, providence, the fact that I'm sitting next to somebody in an airplane,
that's just
in the world.
Providence and all the things like lining up right in the right order.
Exactly. So I'm like, all right. So once we finally got the approval for the protons, went to I had to actually go to Boston, even though there's a proton center out here at UC Davis. Went to Boston. I can't remember if it was, I think it was Boston, Massachusetts, yeah, Mass General. And yeah, so we did it out there. And then, we did the prep, we did, all of the proton treatments. And what was really ironic was driving in Boston when you can only see out of half your left eye. I don't know if you've driven in Boston before, but there aren't really no rules for driving.
I've heard this. I've experienced
Yeah,
it in
if you
Philadelphia
want
a
to
little
move, you
bit,
move.
but the East Coast is definitely different than West Coast driving.
It's a shock, right? And so,
Yes.
well, I quickly found out if you want to move into a lane, you just go. So even if you have eyesight, it doesn't really matter. You just do it. Anyway, so it was fine, and then after the treatment was over, you don't really notice it while you're going through. You see this purple light shining and kind of flashing, and but the actual effects don't come until after. So anyway, I mean, that was really a long
So during the
story
proton
short.
beam, like they basically kind of prop your eye open so that they can beam the radiation at it. And you mentioned that they had to surgically go in and place clips to help hold your eye open, and to direct the radiation the right way, all those things. And you also, I think you mentioned that it's a pretty short treatment, like 15 minutes long, but that it feels like forever because you're laying there like being told like don't blink, even though your eye is literally being held open by everything, like you can't blink.
Right.
So do they do anything like to numb your eye like during that procedure, like so that you can't feel it, or is it just like, here, hope this is comfortable, we'll be done soon? That's kind of how I felt like with plaque. It was kind of like, okay, 7 days later, like, here you go. Metal from hell in your
I wonder
eye.
what that was like, actually, what plaque is like, because I was told that it's kind of tough.
It depends on the size of the tumor and the placement, I think. I also went into it expecting that my doctor had cut the muscles. Like there's some muscles, that they sometimes need to snip to be able to place things. And I went to it expecting that she had to do that. And I only found out the day that she removed my plaque, she did not have to cut any of the muscles, which is actually a good thing. But I thought that it was worse than it was. And so I think that mentally I kind of like made it more painful than it maybe was, but it also was just not comfortable. But like my plaque was like this big. Like my plaque was huge. It was like the size of a flat kidney that you get at SeaWorld. It was probably about as big of a plaque as you can go for the size of my tumor. So I know we talked about Harry Potter references earlier, but it was like having a Horcrux in my eye that like hurt like a bunch. That's what I described it as. It was like I felt like I was wearing the Horcrux, only it was in my eye, and I felt miserable and grumpy, and then I got it out, and I was like, I feel so much better.
Yeah, what a relief, huh?
Yeah, it was definitely a relief. So you had the proton beam therapy, and that takes place a few sessions, right? That's like, how many sessions did you have for the size of your tumor? Because I saw in your story you mentioned that you knew that it was a class 2 melanoma. Did you know that before proton beam or after?
So a couple months prior to doing the proton beam, Dr. Char that's my doctor, called me up and said, you have a class 2 melanoma. They did the biopsy when they did the tantalum ring markers, when they put those inserted in the eye. And so he called me up and said, you've got a class 2 melanoma. And I said, well, is it for certain class 2? He says, without a doubt. He says, and it's spreading fast. So you need to get this done now.
Yeah, hence the insurance battle turned into like, okay, why not?
Right, yeah, but it's not medically necessary. So anyway, so I got that call, and I mean, it was just, I actually called Castle Biosciences and I asked them, I said, well, what does this mean? How positive are you that this is just a class 2? I mean, do we know if it's a BAP1 mutation? Do we know if it's, because at that point, I'm kind of one of those guys, and when I find out that I have something medically wrong like that, I do a lot of research. I've had, this is probably the 3rd rare disease I've had in my lifetime. So every time I go through something like this, I want to know everything I can about it. And the doctor at Castle, he's like, yeah, he says, you have issues with chromosome 8, chromosome 3, BAP1. He goes, it's all there. And I'm like, great. So I said, well, and it's kind of funny, my dad and I talked about this later, and he says, I got to tell you, I never want to stand next to you in a thunderstorm. He says, you get struck by lightning are way higher than anybody else I know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, don't come here. We've had microbursts here in Arizona, and it's been insane.
Oh yeah, I've heard.
Lots and lots of it's like having a miniature hurricane, like 70-mile-an-hour winds and lots of lightning and trees catching on fire, and it's just been nuts.
What?
So speaking of lightning,
right, stay away.
Yeah. Okay. So you had. Let's see. 3/4 the speed of light. Yeah, that would be rather frightening. And also, like, please don't miss.
Well, and that was the one thing they said. They said, whatever you do, don't move your eye. For 15 minutes, I had to stare at this light, and I felt like
I guess I just am like, at what point, like, because I know for plaque, like, they surgically go in and place it, you go to sleep, and well, at least my doctor put me to sleep. I was like, don't let me be awake for this. Like, I don't want to be awake. The other doctor, my first doctor, he wanted to have me awake for the procedure, and I was like, see ya. Like, I'm leaving, and I'm not doing that. Like, I am not your science experiment. I'm sorry. And but yeah, I can't even believe they wouldn't just put you to sleep. But I guess for 15 minutes, like, it's probably easier on your body to just not, especially if you have to do it 5 times or 6 times or however many times.
Exactly. Well, and I did ask them about that, and they said, well, we need you awake so that we can have you focus on the beam or on the, we need to make sure that your eye don't do rapid eye movement or anything like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That makes sense.
But that's, I mean, I guess that's cool that they've been able to develop like the technology to make it possible to do that compared to plaque. So you mentioned yours is class 2. Do you happen to remember the size of your tumor?
Yes, it was it wasn't very deep. It was about a 3 millimeter tumor deep, but it was about 14 millimeters wide.
Wow.
So
it was like doing this.
Exactly. So it was going deep faster than it was going both ways.
Yeah.
And by the time they got to it, it had already, within just a couple months, it had already gone another few millimeters. So it was really growing pretty rapidly.
It was rapid, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it was, actually, what was kind of weird, and this is how much of a nerd I am, I actually have the radiation treatment plan that they show, how big the tumor is, where they shot it, how the radiation was, done. And so it's interesting. Again, sometimes, and I don't know how you, feel about this. I don't really think about it all the time, but when I do, it almost kind of freaks you out a little bit. But at the same time, there's still peace. Does that make sense?
I think so. And I feel like I can relate to that because it's kind of like this feeling that, like, okay, yes, there's lots of things to be afraid of here. There's lots of things that, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of that fear still sometimes, especially like just with young kids. But like at the end of the day, I guess what I tell myself is that, like, this could be what, I'm a little more aware of my mortality. That's kind of what I've talked to people about, is that, like, at the end of the day, I could die in a car crash tomorrow, or some other freak accident could happen. And this just happens to be one very probable way that it could happen, and it could or could not. Like, I don't have a guarantee of that any more than I do of getting or not getting in a car accident. Like, it's just as likely to happen tomorrow, like, as this is to happen, in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But I do feel like I at least try to kind of keep my brain in a place where I feel like I can focus on, like, okay, well, I know what I don't want. I know what I don't want. So I'm going to try to focus on what I do want. And I guess just try and, like, trust that can manifest itself. So, I mean, that's one of my, I do like daily affirmations. I'm not perfect, nobody is, but I do daily affirmations. And one of my affirmations is that, like, what if, it's just the what if, because as someone who struggles with anxiety, like, what if, and like the big scary what ifs, like, those tend to be the things that my brain goes to the most easily. And so I found that it's helpful sometimes, at least it brings me peace, like, to think about, like, okay, well, what if it actually went really, really well? And so one of the things that I've said is like, what if my eye heals like faster than it ever possibly could? And what if what if, as crazy as it sounds and as impossible as my doctor has told me many times that it should be, what if my eye actually ends up getting better on its own because I have a retina detachment and I can't see it all? And what if it eventually gets some sight back? I don't know if that'll happen, but like, what if it did? Like, that'd be cool. I don't know how it would come back. I don't know if it would be because they do an eye transplant one day or they have some new technology they come up with, but like, what if it did? That would be really cool. And like, what if in 5, 10, 20, 50 years I'm still here and I'm alive and kicking and all the things, and so like that's what I feel like I try to go to when I'm that I guess that's what brings me that feeling of peace, focusing on that and looking for what I do want.
For sure. Well, it was interesting because for the longest time, I was, so I do a lot with our church, right? So right now I'm on the worship team and I'm playing percussion. And it's kind of something that I always felt that I wanted to do. But you know what? I never made the time for it before. And like you said, once you are kind of aware of your mortality, you realize that, my gosh, the diagnosis says I can only have this long. I mean, who knows what that's going to look like? And that I try not to scare anybody with that, right? Because it's just a statistic. It's like my dad used to work in healthcare, just as I do, and so he was in healthcare administration, so he dealt with statistics, and and maybe this is just his way of coping with the news too. I don't know, but statistics are just that, right? I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has a different timeline. Everybody has a different genetic makeup. I mean, there's so many.
My doctor says we are our own statistic. Like each and every one of us is literally a statistic in the making.
100%. Yeah, exactly. But like you said, it does make you think twice about things, right? I mean, whereas, I may not have gone on a trip before because I'm too cheap. I'll say it. Now I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's go. I don't even question it anymore. It's just, if this is what we want to do, we're going to do it.
I feel like that kind of is a level of freedom. Maybe I think that like, as crazy as it sounds to like be dealing with something like this kind of silent lurking possibility, it still brings that kind of freedom to be present, I think. And I think that is really, I guess that's something that's been important to me. And I feel like something that's been really helpful for me to get present with my kids right now, like while they're little. Just knowing that, like, that I don't have that guarantee of if I'll be there when they have kids. But I do have now. And
absolutely.
And I think that kind of that freedom from worrying about all of the things in the future to just be like, okay, well, I have to focus on right now, because it's kind of like you don't really have any other choice.
True.
In some ways, I feel like, just like with class 2, like, I don't know if you're still having the, what do you call them? The scans every 3 months, or if you're down to like a shorter or a longer duration, but like living your, kind of living our month or our living our life, like in those 3-month increments sometimes. And just really like, I don't know, just focusing on like what you said, like saying yes to the things that you want to do just because you want to do them. And you don't have a guarantee of how it'll be possible in a year or 2 or 5. So why wait? Like, it's just money. we all make money. We can just save it. Right. It's fine.
Exactly. And, I kind of got to the point where I value time more than I am anything else. And I used to think, I want to achieve all these things. I want to do all these things. And now, I mean, it's, if you knew what I was like before, I'm exactly like what you're saying. I mean, I have anxiety through the roof. Most people wouldn't guess it, but I mean, it doesn't take much for me to start thinking the what ifs. I used to have to go through things like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that to really kind of train my mind to think differently. It's hard for somebody to understand who doesn't have it, but having a diagnosis like this, it makes you go from 0 to 60 pretty quick.
Yeah, I told my mom, I'm like, I went from like alive to dead in about a split second. Like it was real fast. It happens really quick.
Exactly. Oh yeah. And I mean, the more statistics I got, the worse it got. And what actually made it harder, just so at the end of 2019, I think is when it was. People I'd gotten to know, I started seeing them like pass away from this disease and from complications.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple people specifically.
Yeah, one was the lady on the airplane that I mentioned, and she was a spokesperson for Cancer Treatment Centers in America specifically for this, which was, again, I mean, what are the odds of that happening? But that hit me pretty hard because it's like that was the first person I met. She was kind of a key, well, like I said, a key part of my testimony. And when I saw it, it made it hit home. Like, oh my gosh, this can really happen. But slightly before that, I met a gentleman who we started the Ocular Melanoma Man Cave together because he called me up and said, hey, listen, you know what? I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to see a computer. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do anything. And I really need your help to get this thing started. And I thought, again, here I am. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know if I have time. And all of a sudden I thought, you know what? I'm going to make the time. This is important. There are men who need help that wouldn't necessarily open up on an open forum if they knew that it wasn't just guys. But when you get just men opening up, it's amazing what things come out of that. They're more candid, they're more honest, they're not always not crass. I won't say that.
That's okay. We all have our coping mechanisms. My mom and I have decided swearing is totally
valid. Well, it's funny because one guy actually said something like that, and then the next thing he goes, "Oh, sorry, am I supposed to say that here?" Like, it's fine.
There are no rules in cancer. There are no rules.
There are no rules. That's right. Exactly. You feel how you feel, and then that's. So when this guy, he actually sent me a voicemail one time, and it was over Messenger. He's doing voice to text, and what was really kind of touching to my heart, and I still, I mean, it still actually gets me choked up today. Sorry.
It's okay. We can cry here.
Yeah. So he basically was what he told me was, he says, I heard all the time I'm getting new tumors popping up. He says I can't even see anymore. All I have left is to be able to text, to do a voice call. And then he just choked up and started crying. This is like your ultimate tough guy, right? So to hear him do this was just like heartbreaking. But he says it just hurts so much. All I can do anymore is just cry and pray. And I was like, oh. I mean, I didn't know what to do with that. It was just so, but at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep this going. Just
and like what a gift, like that you guys were able to create that space where you both felt comfortable to be vulnerable, but also like to create that space for other men, because I think that is very, very needed in this kind of a community, and really just in our culture, like just with what we face in our culture. I think that too many boys grow up being told to stop crying and to stop being a baby, or stop stop being a girl, or whatever words we use or we heard as kids, and we learn to stuff our emotion down. And not to say that girls don't do this too. I definitely got that as a kid, and I internalized that. But I do think that at least I've kind of noticed that it tends to happen a lot more often with boys. And
absolutely.
And I think that with something like this, like you need the ability to be heard, and to feel like it's safe, to feel what you're actually feeling. Because if you don't feel it, it will catch up to you. It will catch up to your body in other ways. So
that's right. It's terrible to internalize stuff like this, and it really is. And you mentioned before the toughness, right? You're feeling tough for your family. You're feeling tough for everybody around you, and and it's true. I mean, it's so funny because, I don't like to burden people with things, right? And that, I don't want to make people feel bad. And I love to joke around, love to have fun. So when somebody says to me something like, well, gosh, what's it like? I'm like, it's good. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm kind of going through it. So it's like, I'm not going to get down with it. So my goal whenever I meet somebody is, even though they're uncomfortable talking about it, or they see me and they're like, whoa, what's going on with you? Or, of course I get a lot of pirate jokes, but that's beside the point. I don't want to bring them down. I mean, if they ask, I'll tell them the story, but one quick example here. So this is actually a mixed blessing, right? I mean, I'm really wear the patch because it hurts like crazy all the time from the radiation. And I can only see like a pinhole out of my vision. And so, but the rest of it.
So you do still have your eye, correct?
I do.
So you wear the patch for, like you said, with helping with the light, with the pain, and obviously when you can't really see much, it kind of feels like more of a nuisance than anything.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is that when they did the muscles in the eye, it forced the eye not to track. So as when I kind of look from side to side, I get double vision. So when you're driving, that doesn't really help when you're seeing 4 cars.
How many cars are over here? Too
exactly. Many. And why are they on top of each other? I don't get that.
I know, right?
Which is really awesome, because I have to travel to San Francisco, and driving in the Bay Area is just amazing. But I will tell you that when I look to change lanes, everybody gets out of my way immediately. It's phenomenal.
Do you have a bumper sticker, and where can I get one?
Right, I should. I totally should. And we should market that.
I have blind spot. Please avoid me. Avoid my car, and then everyone will be happier.
Well, it was really cute. This kid with Sunday school comes up to me at church, and she says, we have this kid in our Sunday school class who's refusing to wear his patch. He's got a lazy eye, and the parents have asked if you would talk to him. So I walked up to him, and he says, oh gosh, Mr. Jeff, do you wear your patch all the time? And I said, oh yeah, all the time. He says, how long do you have to wear it? I said, probably the rest of my life. I said, how about you? How long do you have to wear yours? He goes, only a year. I could do a year. I could totally do a year. He's like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And so he walked away and says, you and me, man, we're going to be patch buddies. So now I got a patch buddy.
That's super sweet. Well, that is awesome. Oh my goodness. I feel like we covered so many different things. I don't even feel like I have any questions specifically. Let's see. When was your most recent checkup on the tumor, on like your scans and all of those things?
It was early June.
Okay, so I think we probably had scans and things around the same time.
Yeah.
And you still have those every 3 months?
Yes.
Okay. So far everything looks good. Is your tumor shrinking, or is it still the same size?
Still the same size. It hasn't shrunk since, and I've had radiation retinopathy. I'm still dealing with that, and I have to get shots in the eye every so often, which sounds bad. It's not as bad as you might think.
It's just a needle in your eyeball. It's no big deal.
No big deal.
It's no big deal. They put numbing drops in and you can't feel anything. That's all I've heard. I actually haven't had to have the Avastin shots yet. I guess, do you remember what I was telling you about, like my affirmation and the things that I've been saying and kind of putting it out in the universe? My recent checkup with my eye doctor, I went from having early signs of glaucoma and signs of radiation retinopathy back in March to in June. She's like, wow, I'm comparing the pictures and your eye looks better now than it did 3 months ago. And she was just like in awe. She's like, it's shrinking, like it shrank a millimeter, which the depth, mine was like 12 millimeters deep. So it's pretty thick.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, it shrank and your retina is reattaching itself. I don't understand how, because there's still this giant tumor around it, but like it's doing work and it looks healthier there. And the fluid and the radiation retinopathy has gone down like a ton. So she was just like, she kept asking me, can you see? And I'm like, You told me I would never see again, so no.
Right. So you're saying that there's still a chance.
Yeah. So now I'm just like, okay, well, miracles happen. So I'll take what I can get. And right now that means no shots, which I will be frank, those still freak me out. I don't have to have them yet though, because I don't have any pain. And so like, I guess that's something that I've found helpful. And maybe you find this helpful too. It's just like that I sometimes get caught up in the things that feel wrong about this, or the things that I kind of wish I could make go away. And sometimes I have to just get grateful for the things that like I actually have that are gifts about this. And, just the fact that I was diagnosed within like 2 days of noticing symptoms, and the fact that, that my eye doctor acted quickly and got me into a retina specialist the same day that she saw me. And right before a weekend even, and that that I don't have any pain in my eye, where almost a year out, so many people have pain in their eye. Tons of different things. Lauren, I'm not sure if that's a question for me. She's asking, did they reattach your retina? So my retina is still technically detached. It has a tumor underneath it like this, and so it's like it can't do much right now, but it is starting to kind of compress the tumor again like this. So this is the retina detachment, that little triangle over here. This is a great visual. I feel like we're making shadow puppets. But this is my retina over here, and this gap has gotten smaller by her measurements, and so she's seeing more tissue there instead of fluid, which is what she's like shocked by. So I'll take it, right? So that was, I guess that's maybe my final question is, what would you say are maybe like the top 2 gifts or 3 gifts that you would feel like have come of this? Just to kind of sum up.
Sure. 2 to 3 gifts. Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of them. I would say one is a greater appreciation for family, for sure. Not that I didn't before, but it certainly makes me really want to be with them more. I've declined a lot of positions at work traveling, specifically because I just don't want to leave my family. That's one. I would say it made me put my priorities in order, not just family, but also church family. I always say the joy of the Lord is my strength, and it most certainly is. And I never really realized how much I needed that strength until I started realizing that I need it. You don't realize you need it until that's all you have. And then I think the third thing would be, quite honestly, all the great people I've gotten to meet since, through this organization, through just different groups. I've met so many people. I've had the opportunity to share the story with people on airplanes, with people in, just all over the place. And the one thing I keep getting is, we're so grateful that you've got joy in this, and that you are so strong that you can, even though I know in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, if you only knew.
If you only knew all the days.
Oh my gosh, there are some days when I just it's just crazy. Anyway, I think that would probably be the top 3, and it just really made me appreciate and be grateful for the life that I had left to live.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Okay, spur of the moment question.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I had a thought. So hold on. Before I get to that question, I just had a thought. There was somebody. I'm sure you've gotten this. In talking to people, friends, family, strangers on airplanes. Totally the person that would have been like talking to you on the airplane. By the way, I do that. But he. I guess the phrase that I get told a lot is like, wow, like you're so strong, you're such a warrior. And I feel like that's a term that people tend to use a lot with cancer patients. And, I've known other people who have had cancers, and I've used the phrase in describing them, just like, oh my gosh, you're so strong. And I felt like initially when people were telling me that, I personally kind of felt like you said, kind of well, do you even know? Like, I don't feel courageous or strong or anything. Like when I'm dealing with this, when I'm in the middle of some of these emotions, when I'm, getting a scan, like I'm doing everything I can to just like stay calm, like, and it kind of got me to thinking that, like, maybe the warrior isn't someone who goes, courageously and like fearlessly into battle. Maybe what makes a warrior is being willing to feel the fear and face it anyway.
Not give up.
And yeah, and to not give up, or if you fall down, to get back up and try again. I think that to me, like that is, I guess to me, that's the definition, more, not so much of courage, but more of resilience. I think courage and resilience really go hand in hand. So I love that. So that's actually, once I'm off my clinical trial and all the things, I am hoping to get a tattoo that says resilience on my wrist, because that's like my favorite word. Ever.
That's a great
word
to have
right now. I did have, I guess, 2 questions. One is, you are class 2. Were you, at the time that you were diagnosed, were you able to be a part of any clinical trials?
So I was a part of a clinical trial. So it wasn't like a medical clinical trial. It was more of like a, am I willing to allow my blood to be used for clinical trials kind of thing. Then obviously, yes. I mean, what do I got to lose? Nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay. So you, at the time that you were diagnosed, there weren't any like adjuvant clinical trials that you were able to participate in?
No, not at the time.
Okay. Well, good news is that there do seem to be some more of them lately. So that's a good thing.
That's great.
That's something that I've been in. It's been a little bit of a challenge, but I won't get into that. The ups and downs of having medication poisoning your system and worrying that like you might be doing it when you don't have to is a little much.
Well, I bet.
It's a little much, but thankfully the doctors and the team like is all really good about, they are just really good about monitoring you. So if you are someone listening to this, to this episode or video or whatever it is, whatever avenue that you're listening on, and you are in class 2, and you're listening in this year, I would definitely seek out, with your ocular oncologist or your medical oncologist, look for clinical trials for adjuvant, because there might be something that'll help. Like, it may not be a huge help, but something is better than nothing for where we're at with class 2. And that's kind of what I look at. So, okay, less serious note. Do you have a favorite song? You mentioned you love music, and do you have just a favorite song, or, I mean, it could be an album, a singer, whoever, but just who's somebody that we could go listen to that would remind us of your story?
Well, yes. So being a musician, I do a lot of like Afro-Cuban stuff, so I wouldn't highly recommend that. But I would say my favorite song, and it's actually what's got me through a lot of hard times, is called "Peace Be Still." It's by Hope Durst. It's a Christian artist, but if you look it up and look at the lyrics, you'll know what I'm talking about. It talks about the calm in the storm, the just being at peace with whatever comes, because you know that what's happening inside of you is greater than what's happening to you.
I love that. Okay. Can you say the artist's name again? I'm just writing it down to post it for people.
Yeah, it's Hope. And I want to say it's Durst or Darst. Let me look it up here real quick. Darst, D-A-R-S-T.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I will post that once we conclude this video and this episode. But I am so glad that I got to chat with you, Jeff.
That's been great. Thank you.
If you didn't catch it earlier in this interview, Jeff mentioned that he is the moderator and the admin behind the man cave. Is that what it's called? The
Ocular Melanoma Man Cave.
Okay, Ocular Melanoma Man Cave over on Facebook. And so if you're here listening on Instagram, you're listening on YouTube or the podcast, feel free to find him or head to the Instagram, and you can message me and just ask about the man cave if you are someone who would like to be directed to the man cave. And I may actually be able to even link that in the Instagram bio. So Jeff, we can talk about that later. But okay, well, thank you so much for being on, Jeff, and for sharing your wisdom and your hope and your joy in the face of all of this. And I'm glad that, like, I mean, you're what? Are you now over 3 years into your diagnosis?
Yep, exactly.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, I feel like these kinds of stories give a lot of hope. And this is like a
30-year plan as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know, right? We just keep taking it like as we go. I feel like these kinds of stories are helpful because I think we can hear ourselves. I think this helps us kind of accept like what this looks like. And also, like you said, the people, like to just know that like there's other people going through this with us and that we are not alone. Not even a little bit. So thank you so much. I'm going to actually end the live video first, and then we'll end the recording over on Zoom. But thanks for joining us over here on Instagram, you guys. Let me see. How do I end it? I always forget. Okay.
Thanks for joining us over here on Instagram, you guys.
That one's done.
Let me see.
All right.
How do I end it?
There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Got it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
We're going to help with it. Oh, dang it. Are you hearing my feedback?
I am.
Oh, I'm going to be mad at technology if it's giving me feedback in this whole recording. Okay, it'll be fine.